The other thing that they do, and I'll share my screen with a few images again. The other thing that they love to do is they build castles. Oh, sorry, that's another change. They build castles. There's one which will be familiar to many of you, which I had the enormous pleasure of visiting. And just to digress for a moment, I think the Great Zimbabwe is one of the most extraordinary places I've visited anywhere in the world, and I never knew anything about it. And that tells you something in itself about the way that we are taught in our own country. We all learn about the pyramids, but why not the Great Zimbabwe? It's every bit as impressive. And this guy, by the way, who's called Teach, is the best tour guide that I've ever had anywhere in the world. What a great guy. And the reason why he's a great guy, and again, we'll come back to this, is he's a storyteller. He's a master storyteller. And he brought the place to life. I digress. People in authority like to build castles. They've always liked to build castles. Here's another one that I know well and I've visited. Some of you will recognize that in Gondar in Ethiopia. When I show that, by the way, to people in Europe, when I show them that picture and say, where is that? They say, oh, it must be in Scotland or Ireland. When I tell them that it's in Africa, they just find it hard to believe. It's one of another absolutely amazing place. If you ever get the chance to visit Gondar in Ethiopia, please don't miss it. It's wonderful. So people build castles. And in the old days, that's what the castles looked like. Stone, made of stone and earth. And they were really difficult to get into. If you're on the outside of that wall, how on earth do you get in there? But today's castles look like this. And I would argue that those are just as difficult to get into. They are institutional or conceptual strongholds. So the EU is a massive fortress. The UN is a fortress. The World Bank, the financial institutions in my home city in London are fortresses. And believe me, even in London, which is our left-hand picture there, that's the financial district of London. There are people, ordinary people, poor people living right next door to that. And it's another world to them. They never go there. They don't get inside there. How do young people begin to get in there? In some ways, fortresses are positive because they provide stability, and we hope, provide peace. And on the other hand, they're very hard to enter, as I say, and they're very slow to admit change. So if you come saying this must change, that must change, they probably don't want to hear you. These fortresses, I regard them as meta-democratic, post-democratic. They're kind of legitimized by an underlying democratic process, but in themselves, they're more like an oligarchy in the way that they function. They're powerful. They display power. These 21st century castles protect and reinforce the establishment and its authority, just like the old stone castles used to do. And they do it in a variety of ways. They might do it through vested interests, politics, propaganda, dogma, or at worst, through repression, corruption, or using their armies to fight unpopular wars. Above all, they do it through money. They control money. These, one on the left, the financial centers of the City of London control unimaginable amounts of our money, your money, my money, everyone's money. And the new kings who inhabit these castles can become just as arrogant and complacent as the old kings. And then they may also become careless and vulnerable. And you don't need to be a conspiracy theorist to understand the nature of that power. So what about their relationship with young people? It can easily become restricted and formalized, if, as you would see, through the roles of teachers, police, authority figures of different kinds. But even the role of a parent is a kind of a formal thing in its own way. It's something that's identifiable. And what that means is as it becomes formalized, it becomes a hierarchical relationship in which respect is a one-way street. You respect them. How much do they respect you? And at worst, and here's another well-known example that you may have heard about or read about. Someone like Mao Zedong, who was the leader of the Chinese Communist Party from its original time until he died in the 1970s. He harnessed the power and the energy of youth, of young people, for his own personal reasons, through the Red Guards, as these were called, and what was known as the Cultural Revolution. And that is harnessing the energy of young people, but also perverting it for the wrong purposes. And that's still a real danger in the world today.